nice and tight so these guys can walk by. Let me make another follow-up statement on Godfrey's question. All right, or my comment, my off. When I hear sermons by Messianic Jews or people who are not Jewish bloodline but still in the Messianic Jewish community, most of the time the sermons talk about sections of the Bible that talk about the continuity of God's promises to the Jews. When I hear sermons by Arab believers in Jesus, or those who are within the community of Arab believers in Jesus, even though they might not be bloodline Arab, most often the sermons are on justice and righteousness by the oppressors against the oppressed. The sermons tend to fall into those camps. Let's say 60 to 70% of the time, that's the main theme. There's not going to be any progress in unity until each of them chooses to preach on each other's texts. Preach on the text the other is preaching on and make it relevant for your congregation. Then you're going to start to have progress coming together. But both, we do the same thing. We're very selective as to the part of the Bible that we like, that we speak about, rather than the holistic, complicated one. So it's difficult. It's very difficult. We long for the sermons, Diane and I, Sunday morning, that are just normal sermons about how to get along in life, as opposed to everything else that's going on.
Yes.
And we don't see it. We don't see it at basically any church. We don't see it. So, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. In the first century, and you've got pages in your blue book about it, in the first century, we have a style of tomb that is unique to the first century. We have a style of tomb that is unique to the first century. And a style of burial that is unique to the first century. Prior, in the time of the Old Testament, if your family was wealthy enough to actually have a tomb that was carved into the bedrock, not everybody was, of course, but if you had a tomb that was able to be carved into the bedrock, the body is laid on a slab, resting on a stone-carved pillow, the shape of the headdress of the Egyptian goddess Hathor. All right. When the body decays and all that's left are the bones then are taken and they're put into a lower, deeper in repository, a large, not all that large, but a room in which all the bones are collected. So that literally you are gathered to your fathers, your bones, your father's bones, your brother's bones, your grandfather's bones, all of them are together in the same spot. When we dig such tombs, we find these piles of bones often, and we found a number of them in Jerusalem. That represents a community, a collectiveness of identity, where the smallest functional unit is not the individual, it's the family, it's the Beit Av, it's the multi-generational unit that lives together in the house and dies together and is buried together. The phrase is, and so died and was gathered to his fathers. It's pulled this way a little bit. It's not just a theological statement, it's a literal statement as to what happens to the bones. In the time of the New Testament, we have a heightening of the individual and the identity of the individual as being a significant unit. This may be a reflection of some more individualistic thought coming out of Hellenism. Not exactly sure. But what happens is the tomb shape becomes different. At the time of the New Testament, if you're wealthy enough to have a tomb that's actually cut into bedrock, when the person dies, the body then is wrapped and placed into something that's called a koch. It's a narrow, deep opening at the back of the tomb, about this wide, shoulder width, about 6 feet deep, about so high, and the body is slid in there. kind of like the cooler in the morgue, right? You kind of slid in there, and then a stone slab is put in front of that. There are more of these slits should others die within the year. All the way outside, there's another stone slab. Sometimes it's round. Sometimes it's square. The term is the same, whether it's round or square. Based on the term, we don't know if Jesus' tomb door was round or square. The term is the same. A year later, after the body decays and all you have left are the bones, the slabs are taken off and the bones then are collected and they're placed in a box like the ones that you saw, those limestone boxes. The box is called an ossuary, a bone box. It's a mini coffin, solid piece of limestone carved out, the workshop, and then a limestone slab on top. It's put back into the slit, into the koch, and there it's left. Individual burial. Sometimes you'll find a mother and her newborn baby together in one. Mother and a young child. Usually the bone boxes are empty when we find them. Even the bones after 2,000 years have disintegrated, not always. And we can do something then about gender and age and life expectancy and DNA and all this kind of stuff, right? Based on it, and that's good to know. Sometimes the ossuaries are decorated. You saw most of them and they were plain. Some of them had that rosette, that flower design on it. That's a Jewish symbol. Once in a while, it will be inscribed with the name of the dearly departed. What we're talking about is a few names used over and over and over again. There weren't a lot of options for first names in the day. We found the tomb of Caiaphas, the guy who shows up in the Bible, the high priest. We found his tomb. In excavation, a park was being dug south of here by about a mile. The backhoe hit the tomb. It was intact, unopened. And inside, an ossuary with his name on it, Caiaphas. It's in the museum now. It's extremely decorated, very finely decorated, like you would expect the high priest's tomb to be. We also found, up north here on the Mount of Olives, a place called Givat HaMivtar, a place up here. We found an ossuary, opened the top, bones inside. The heel bone was still there, and through the heel bone was a nail. This poor fellow had been crucified. The nail was still there, and from the nail, the corroded, of course, we can find out the kind of metal, soft iron. We can unbend the corrosion. We figured the nail was about this long. We know which direction through the heel it went. It went sideways through the heel. That tells us how the guy was nailed to the stake. Either this way or this way with the tree coming up. This way. One or the other, likely close to the ground. Naked. That's part of the shame. You need to be close enough that you can recognize the face of your neighbor who revolted against Rome. You need to see, they need to see you eye to eye. You need to be able to spit on them. Or if they're naked, do something else. It's part of the, we've got, I should have brought them. We have statements from Greek and Roman authors about crucifixion. About how the bodies are left on the cross until they basically fall off through their own decay. About how the wild animals and the wild dogs and the vultures come and feed on the bodies and take meat home to their young. About how the innards come out. You know, we call it the place of the skull, Golgotha, and we think that's because it looked like a skull, the mountain. I think there were skulls there. That's the bone place. And we make the cross golden or polished wood and we put it up high. a tomb that's rock hewn can only be the tomb of a family that's wealthy enough to have extra land that you're not farming or living on, a cut above. These are the tombs we find. All of the rest of us, which is the vast majority, scratch a hole, hope the animals don't get it. This poor fellow who was crucified must have been a fairly high standard, way up there. Did he fall afoul of somebody else in high places? Yeah, Sir Walter Raleigh, what a great hero. He was executed by the king. Happens, doesn't it? It happens. We read about Pharisees crucifying Sadducees. Sadducees crucifying Pharisees. I mean, what's happened to the church? You know what I mean? Jesus was fortunate, actually. He was fortunate. He had somebody who wanted to take care of him. A disciple on the upper level who was able to do that. And unlike the people who we read about in Greek and Latin writings, died fairly quickly. He was fortunate.